Alright, this is your lesson for section 8.1, which is circles and circumference. If you'll get your notes out for that, we're going to take some notes on 8.1, and we're going to talk about circles. So the first line on your notes, please fill in that circles are the set of points in a plane that are a fixed distance from a given point called the center. So what that's saying is if you have any point, so here's a point, if you come out a certain distance, so let's say we came out this far, all the points that are that distance away from that center point form a circle. The next line you need to fill in that the radius is the distance from the center to any point on the circle. So if you go from the center, each of these different lines is called a radius. This is a radius, radius, radius. The diameter is the distance across a circle, and it must pass through the center. So anything that goes all the way across the circle and cuts through the center is called a diameter. And then circumference. Circumference is the distance around a circle. So if you were to walk all the way around the outside of a circle, that would be your circumference. So let's look at this diagram here. Take a moment and see if you can label everything on this circle. When you're done, turn your computer back on. Okay, let's go ahead and fill these in. We would want to say that this line all the way across right here is the diameter. Maybe draw an arrow to it. And let's draw an arrow right here. This is your radius. Okay. And this dot right here, in a different color so you can see it, is showing that if I had gone all the way around, that would have been my circumference. And this entire thing is a circle. So a few words that you need to understand. Circles have circumference. Means a distance all the way around. You need to know how to look at the radius, which is halfway across. The diameter is all the way across in a circle. So we are going to look at how to find circumference. You have this chart on your notes. There's a few things you need to fill in on it. In words, we say that the circumference, or we use the letter C for it, of a circle is the letter or the number pi times the diameter. So, and diameter is d. So 2 pi times the radius would be another way to do it. So here's an example in numbers. The circumference is equal to your diameter, which is 6 here, times pi. Or if you used the radius instead, you would use 3 and double it. So 2 times 3 is 6 as well. Either way, you come out with 18.8. What you need to fill in is in this last table where it says algebra. You need to fill in that circumference is pi times diameter, or 2 times pi times radius. And that's because you just double a radius to get a diameter. Now, at the bottom here it says, remember, pi, which is written with this kind of goofy looking symbol here, is an irrational number that is often approximated by the rational numbers. Fill this in, 3.14, or if you're doing fractions, it's 22/7. Those are the numbers you need to know for pi. So we're going to look at working with some problems, finding circumference and finding area. But first of all, let's work with radius and diameter. Practice on your notes. It says the diameter of a circle is 20 feet. Find the radius. To find radius, now if the diameter is all the way across, radius is halfway across, so you should say that your radius is 10 feet. And on B, it says that the radius is 7. It says find the diameter. Diameter, again, is all the way across, so if halfway across is 7, we would say the diameter is double that, which is 14 meters. Okay, so you do these two, and then start the video back up when you're done. Okay, number 1, if the diameter is 16, you should have said the radius would then be 8 centimeters. And number 2, if the radius is 9, you would double that and say that the diameter is 18 yards. So radius is just half of diameter. All right, Now I want you to watch and learn. This is not on your notes. So watch with me, and we're going to figure out how to find circumference. It says find the circumference of each circle, both in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth. Use the form 3.14 for pi. This is what that means. So my circumference or formula is circumference equals pi times diameter. But this one says this has a radius, so we're going to use the other formula, which is 2 pi times radius. Or you can just remember to double your radius. So I would say if my radius is 4, 2 times pi times 4, well, 2 times 4 is 8, so my answer is 8 pi. It says to give it in terms of pi. And then it says give it to the nearest tenth. So grab your calculator, and you're going to multiply 8 times pi. Now, on your calculator, to find the pi button, you don't want to find it because even though it's there, it asks you to use 3.14, and this will round for you better. So you're on your calculator, you're just going to type in 8 times 3.14, and it says to give the answer to nearest tenth, which is 1 decimal. So you would say 25 point, now your calculator says 25.12. 2 is not high enough to round it up, so we'll say 25.1, and we're talking about meters. Because it says round to the nearest tenth, we go to 1 decimal. Let's try another one. This one says a diameter of 3.3 feet. So we'll use this formula, pi times diameter. So circumference equals pi times diameter of 3.3. You multiply those together and you just have 3.3 pi. There it is in terms of pi. Now I would just take my calculator and take 3.3 times 3.14, and you're going to round to the nearest tenth. So I would say 10 point, now your calculator says 10.362, but I need to round to the nearest tenth. So this 6 is going to be high enough to bump that number up. So your correct answer would be 10.4 feet would be your circumference. Good, so you've watched 2, so now what I want you to do is I want you to try 2. So look back on your notes and practice these on your notes. It says to find the circumference in terms of pi, and then to the nearest tenth using 3.14 for pi. So try these 2 and then turn your video back on. Okay, on A you should have seen that it was talking about radius, so circumference equals 2 times pi times radius. So 2 times pi times my radius of 8. Well, 2 times 8 is 16, so you should have discovered it was 16 pi. And then when you get that to the nearest tenth, it would be 50.2 centimeters. It says 0.24 in your calculator, but round to the nearest tenth. On B, it's in diameter, so circumference equals pi times diameter. So my diameter is 4.25, so I should have had 4.25 pi. And then when you calculate that out, you would take 4.25 times 3.14, and it would come out to be 13.3 inches. It's 0.345, but we round to the nearest tenth. So that's how you find the circumference of an area, or sorry, of a circumference of a circle. The next thing you see on your notes is you see an example with a Ferris wheel. And it says a Ferris wheel has a diameter of 56 feet. It makes 15 revolutions per ride. So the question says, how far would someone travel during a ride? So let's draw a picture to help us out here. If I have a Ferris wheel, and it has a diameter of 56 feet, and if you get on the ride and you go around all the way 15 revolutions, basically we're finding circumference, and we want to know 15 times the circumference. So I have a diameter, so my circumference is pi times diameter, or diameter times pi. But now it told us to use this number for pi. So let's do that this time. So my diameter is 56 times pi, but I'm going to plug 22 sevenths in. So 56 times 22 over 7. Now this is a very handy thing because 7 goes into 56 8 times. So you really just have to take 22 times 8 to find out your circumference, which is 176 feet. Now this is rounded because we don't have an exact number for pi, but this is a close estimate to use 22 sevenths. Now that's one time around that a person would travel 176 feet, but we're going down around 15 times, so you need to multiply that number by 15, and you would say that a person went 2,640 feet, which is about half a mile. So that's how we could find out how far someone went, knowing how many times they went around a Ferris wheel. All right, let's look at a clock. A clock is a circle. It says the second hand of a clock is 7 inches long. What is the distance it travels in 1 hour? Okay, so the second hand right here is 7 inches long. So if it goes all the way around, that would be 1 circumference. It told us to use pi, so I have a radius. So circumference equals 2 pi r. So 2 times pi times 7 is 14 pi. But it tells us to use, doesn't tell us what to use. We'll use 3.14 for pi. So if I would, or we could use 22 sevenths. Let's use 22 sevenths again. So if I were to take 14 times 22 sevenths, well, 7 goes into 14 2 times. So it basically is going to go 44 inches, 1 revolution. Now, how many times does the second hand go around? The second hand goes around 1 time every minute. For each minute, it says how far will it travel in an hour? So that means it's going to go around 60 times. So we would have to take 44 times 60, and we would find out that it goes 2,640 inches every hour. So that thing travels quite a distance. Okay, now we have one other interesting situation here. Let's see if I can get my next page to come up. Here we go. It says the circumference of the roll of caution tape decreases 10.5 inches after a construction worker uses some of the tape, which is the best estimate of the diameter of the roll after the decrease. So let's think through this. You've got some caution tape, and you have this whole circumference decreased by 10.5 inches after construction workers use some of the tape. So we know the circumference went down by 10.5. So you had some circumference and it went down by 10.5. Okay? It says which is the best estimate of the diameter of the roll after it decreases. So we need to figure out what to do in this situation. So we need to look. It says the circumference right now in the beginning is 31.4. Notice this over here. So it decreased by 10.5, so we'll stick a 31.4 in here. And if you subtract that, 31.4, and you take away 10.5, you come up with 20.9. Now if circumference, we're trying to find diameter, circumference equals diameter times pi. So this number was pi times diameter, and we're trying to find the diameter. We just have to divide out the pi. So if you divide by 3.14, you come up with 6.65, which rounds to 6.7. So our best estimate is going to be 7 inches. So a lot of things you can do with circumference once you know it. You can use a lot of applications. Now we need to look at one other possibility here, and that is semicircles. This will be the last thing on your notes for today. A semicircle is 1/2 of a circle. So it says find the perimeter of the semicircular region. So the thing is you have to remember that not only do you have half of a circle, you also have to include the diameter in it. So it says the straight side of it is 6 meters long, and the distance around the curve is half the circumference. So circumference equals diameter times pi. So your circumference is going to be 6 pi. My diameter is 6. And we can use 3.14 for our pi. So 3.14 times 6 is going to give us 18.84. But then I have to add in this 6, because going around half the circle is not complete until I add in the diameter. So then when you add 6 to that, you get 24.84. And it doesn't say what to round it to, so we'll just go to that in meters. So you try the next one. These two right here on your notes. Find the perimeter, and when you're done, turn your video back on. Okay, for this first one, I have the diameter, so circumference equals diameter times pi. So I have 2 pi. And so then I can calculate that out, 2 times 3.14. which is going to give you 6.28, and then you need to add in the distance across, which is your diameter, to find the entire distance. So 8.28 feet should have been your answer. Good. And this last one here, my diameter is 7, so circumference equals 7 pi. So 7 times 3.14 would give you 21.98. But I must now add in this distance because I've only found the distance around here. So I add 7 to it and I get 28.98 centimeters. Okay, so that was a lot of notes to think through. Remember your formula, circumference equals pi times diameter. Go ahead and work on your assignment. And when you're done, you need to take 8.1 homework quiz on circumference.